What if I don't want to die? Then you should have never been born. That's logic so airtight you couldn't possibly drive about 15, 18-wheelers through it. No sirree, there is no way that thing wouldn't be driven through as much as the Lincoln goddamn Tunnel or as much as Sunny during the 90s. What sound goddamn logic? Stimpy, you idiot! Whistle is a new horror movie that's a Shudder original getting a limited theatrical release. It comes to us from director Corin Hardy, who's done other horror films including The Hallow and The Nun. That's right, the director of this did this movie. However you felt about The Nun, that may actually dictate how you feel about this movie. Actually, to be perfectly honest, The Nun looks like high-class entertainment compared to Whistle. I'm sorry, I'm already tipping my hand as to how I felt about Whistle. I didn't like it. I didn't like it one bit, and I'll explain why here in due course. That's alright, maybe the writing will at least make it salvageable. We have Owen Edgerton, who did Bloodfest, not to be confused with Hellfest. Don't worry, there's a part of this that reminds me of Hellfest quite a bit. Almost so much that I wonder if they ripped it the fuck off. So anyway, Owen also did Mercy Black, and remembering the scarce amount of shit that I care to remember from that fiasco, that explains a whole lot. So yeah, Whistle has a few people that you may recognize. Daphne Keane, who was in the most recent Deadpool Wolverine movie. I believe she was also a character in Logan, if I recall correctly. She's been on some television. Seems to be one of the bright up-and-coming actresses some of the young people tend to like, I guess. She plays Chrys, who has her own tragic backstory. She moves to a new town and has a cousin, Roll, who helps her be enrolled at the new high school. I'm sorry. That's about the level of humor you're going to expect from this. By the way, I'm skipping over the opening because I'm going to talk about just what I actually didn't like about this in just a little bit. And she ends up meeting some new people, some jocks, some nice girls, and then also there's this weird death whistle that's this kept in this little, Matryoshka doll jar. That's an ancient Aztec death whistle, and if you blow it, well, certain things can happen, like changing death's plan and bringing about your death, or you can see your own death, or whatever. They kind of go through a few different things of what could happen, and then they just heap more shit on you, because this movie's like a mishmash of Wish Upon and Final Destination and various other Grudge, Ring, curse-based movies. If they had a really, really stupid inbred baby. Whistle is really terrible. Again, The Nun was not necessarily great, and upon rewatching it, it actually gets worse because there's so much wasted potential. It's so dark you can't see what the fuck's going on. This movie has some of the worst use of jump scare noises I have seen in a purported modest budget horror movie in fucking years. You can practically predict when they're just going to drop the sound and then boom. Terrible special effects, by the way. Deaths that really aren't all that great. And the performances, look, I'm going to give credit where credit is due. The girls try. They do. Daphne, we have Sophie Nealis, however you say it. She plays Ellie. And you have Ellie Scoveby, who plays Grace. Nick Frost is in this. Nick Frost, he doesn't make it long. That's not necessarily a spoiler, but that's a warning for those of you that are Nick Frost fans. If you're wanting to rush out to your local cinema, get there early because you won't see him for very long. But yeah, this is as stock and standard as you would expect with just your... I understand having a basic story if you have interesting characters or you have a reason to root for at least one or two of these characters. You have no reason to root for any of these people. It is literally like Wish Upon, except Wish Upon actually had a little bit of fun with this concept. Also had Joey King, who I wish was in better projects. I just really want better for Joey King. I want better for everybody involved in this, at least as far as the people that tried. I don't necessarily want better for Corin Hardy because he also apparently produced this. I produce a lot of stuff I don't want the world to see, and he continues to produce shit. And also, Owen, if this is the best example of his writing, he might want to find something else to do that pays well. Because he may not be cut out for this. Terrible jump scares, a terrible narrative, one of the worst villains. And then one of the worst sub-villains that I have seen. One of the worst, ways to kind of, get out of jail free card, essentially. It reminds me, basically, of like Have Your Cake and Edith too. It is just, it's a horror movie that seems unsure of what it wants to be. It takes itself too bone serious for its silly concept, but the concept isn't nearly as silly as it should be. So if they tried to add humor to it, it would have fallen flat. But it's also way too goofy to be taken so seriously. So it's a catch-22. And, of course, the tagline for this is "Don't blow it." I am certainly not twisting that around. How dare you guys accuse me of such a thing? I mean, don't blow it. I mean, if she's not into that, don't make her blow it. I don't know who she is. I'll just let you decide for yourself. So, yeah, I'm going to get into spoilers. This is easily one of the laziest horror movies I've seen, and something that seems to indicate that they have grander plans for this goddamn thing. They think that this thing could potentially be something else, like a possible sequel, because yes, they do hint at a possible sequel. That's not necessarily a spoiler with the way they're doing this stuff and the way you've probably seen a lot of these movies play out time and time and time again. They do hint at a possible sequel. There's also very stupid explanations for what this whistle actually does, and then it just goes back in on itself like a goddamn Mobius strip. Anyway, I'm going to get into spoilers. 3, 2, 1, in theaters now, spoilers. So, basically, in the opening, we have this, whistle. I don't have a coach's whistle, and even if I did, it's nearly 11 o'clock at night when I'm doing this. I'm not going to do that and wake people up, and wake neighbors up, because one of my neighbors has 2 giant Great Danes that are very nice dogs, but they're also very, very loud dogs. So that being said, there are no loud dogs in this, except my dogs are barking. My dogs are telling me, maybe I should just go to sleep. I could have gone to sleep during half of this and not miss shit. Between this and Strangers Chapter 3, by the way, depending on what order you see these in, I actually saw this first, and then I saw Strangers Chapter 3. It is not a good year for horror so far. The Plague started off fine, and boy, we are steadily going downhill. And we got Scream 7 coming up that, yes, I will likely review, and I will make sure to put Palestinian charities donation links in the description, because Melissa Barrera should be involved, and that movie just really looks like it is not doing much to do anything other than generate negative dollars at the box office. So, let's go back to Whistle. We get a guy that apparently wished to be really good at basketball because this weird burn creature is trying to attack him. And there's this, dry ice machine going on that's right at the top of these bleachers in this very, very small high school basketball arena. I mean, even the one that we had probably could have fit about 1,500 people. And we didn't have necessarily that big of a school. At least at the time, we just crammed people in there. But he ends up doing well, but then he ends up getting frightened by all this stuff, by this weird burned creature. And he smashes the container, the whistle, that kind of stuff. He smashes it with the weight. It's done. I'm done doing it. And then he goes into the goddamn shower, and everything seems fine. And suddenly he sees ash, and then he gets fisted so hard in the shower, he bursts into flames. We've all been there before, right, guys? Guys? Somebody tell me I'm not the only person that had that happen. If you have burning from fisting, make sure to consult your doctor or your exorcist. So, fisting exorcist aside, let's talk about the fact that that's one of the goofiest death scenes right there, and it's ridiculous, a terrible CGI, and I don't care if it's a modest budget movie or not. Don't show shit and don't have special effects of shit that you can't make look right. So, then we find out about Chrys, Daphne King's character, who's not related to Commander Keen. Now I want to see her play Commander Keen, and anybody that knows what the hell Commander Keen is, my God, you guys are old. Because that game dates even me. I don't want to say predates me, but nevertheless. Back when Shareware, you had, parts of game, you had like a certain, chapters of games, and you could play that and then get the full version. Who remembers that stuff? It's more interesting than what's going on in Whistle. So she ends up getting into this guy's locker. I don't remember what his name was. His nickname was Horse. And these jock guys try picking on her. This one guy is Perceptive, who ends up kind of being, he's girl Grace's boyfriend. He ends up getting kicked in the balls. To be fair, he deserved it. Also, I mean, yeah, don't do that. He says about her being a drug addict, this kind of stuff, and that her dad's dead. And actually, that is the truth. It turns out that she had OD'd. He drove her to the hospital. They got in an accident, and she blames herself for her dad's death. That's something revealed later on, but I'm just going to reveal it now so I don't forget, and because that keeps the narrative going. She ends up instantly falling for Ellie. I have to say I would have rather followed what Daphne and Sophie were doing as Chrys and Ellie. I think that would have been a far more interesting thing. It felt forced here, but whatever. We all love the LGBTQ community here. Support people, let them be who they are. But it's pretty obvious there's chemistry right there, and that would have been a cool way to go about it. And yes, they kind of play into it a little bit later on. Ellie is a diabetic, but also she's studying to be a doctor. By the way, she's studying to be a doctor, but they're in high school. And I'm not sure. And I think Daphne Keene's only actually 20. So at least it's not like the 30-year-olds that they had in the Friday the 13th or, a bunch of those other slashers where, they're camp counselors, but they're in their 30s. At least that kind of sort of fits. Now, that being said, Chrys, sees that Roll is trying to, basically hit on Grace. And Grace is well-meaning. Of all the pretty girls at, any high school, she probably would at least be the nicest. She does let him down easy a little bit later at this carnival thing that, again, is just like Hellfest. They call it Harvest Fest, by the way. By the way, Hellfest, I might have praised a little bit too much, but I actually don't mind Hellfest. So the whole point is, she gets into this locker, she finds this death whistle thing, and she doesn't end up blowing on it. As tempted as she is to blow it, you're not supposed to blow it, according to the tagline. She gets put in detention with a few others. They end up spilling the beans where she shows the thing to the guy, the professor, played by Nick Frost, who ends up taking it because he's like, yeah, I'm going to kind of do this. And then he ends up testing it as far as blowing it, and the sound can reverberate and everything, but unfortunately, it also heralds your death. Now, he's a heavy smoker. He ends up basically getting his lungs turned black and stuff like that in a really stupid way after trying to auction the thing off, and the thing was supposed to be for almost like 36 grand. So he would have gotten quite a bit of money. Also, Roll is very comic book obsessed with this character called Revenger that is basically like a cross between Crow, Sting, as well. And I'm not talking Brandon Lee's Crow. I'm talking Edward Furlong's Crow, which does kind of sound perverted. And also, just like any standard emo type comic book character deal, whatever. Now, the whole thing is death is going to come after them. After they are gathered, they don't know the professor's dead, by the way. They are going to do this paper. And I think these things are concurrently happening. I think the professor ends up dying at night at the school because apparently Nick Frost doesn't have a home. And Grace ends up blowing on this thing. And everybody's like doing this kind of stuff. By the way, the sound design is absolutely abysmal. And I'm not talking like, it's supposed to make you uncomfortable or, it's well done, because it gets you into the movie. No, it actually makes it where it's like, am I having a stroke? I mean, what's going on here? Because ow. So anyway, she does that, and then it turns out that death is coming for them. And death is basically going to be after them and going to treat them and turn them into the same thing that they would have been at the end of their life. Obviously, it would have just sped up, accelerated like how they were going to die. That's what happened. The professor might have died in 10 to 15 years, but this accelerated that because he used a whistle. Also, the guy that died, by being fisted and catching on fire in the shower, his grandmother apparently knew about the whistle and offers a bunch of exposition, kind of like that lady that had the stuff leaking out of her eyes in the pool movie, Night Swim. That's what I'm trying to think of, not Infinity Pool. I saw other things leaking in that movie that I probably wished I hadn't seen. But anyway, we basically see, a preponderance of exposition where the woman is not doing all that well. She's actually very obviously sick. And because she because something has happened with the whistle, she's got this accelerate thing going on. She says, you can't cheat death, basically. Tony Todd did a lot better. All due respect to this actress, she's fine. But this spirit, whatever the hell it is, Ugata, and Endika, I think is what it is, coming for them. And Grace, at one point, is in the pool, and the brother mentions, Mom says get out of the pool because otherwise you're going to turn into a prune. Oh, gee, I wonder if that's going to come in. A little bit later with that character, I think his name is Drew, the guy that was her boyfriend, they mention, are you drinking and driving again? That's going to kill you. Ha, ho, ho. And because Chrys OD'd, there you go. Also, Ellie is diabetic and this kind of stuff, so maybe there's a, thing with her overworking herself and not taking her insulin. And Roll works at a sawmill. Yeah, what is it? Sawmill, paper mill, whatever it is. The whole point is it's pretty much setting up all this stuff. It's like tarot, and I know it's tarot, but tarot because it made me rot from the inside watching it. This is like a micro, not even a micro, this is like a half-budgeted version of that. Just without the admittedly somewhat creative costume thing, of like, the curses or the fortunes hunting them. So basically, we have everything set up on the silver platter of what's going to happen with them. There's a bit more romance between Chrys and Ellie. Even though Chrys feels that she's fucked up, Ellie does like her. And that would be kind of sweet and would be nice, except it feels so forced. None of these characteristics feel particularly earned, I guess. And eventually, Chrys and Ellie realize that they have to do something about this because they find out about the guy that was fisted so hard he caught fire in the shower. They find out that basically he was going to die from something at the age of, in his 40s. Well, he ended up, and boy, that worries me because I'm in my 40s. But he ended up having it accelerated, so now they're trying to figure this stuff out. They got to go warn everybody. Everybody's at Harvest Fest. So, which Ellie, by the way, invited her to. There was this one part where they're like texting each other back and forth because it's obvious there's a little bit of a chemistry, a little bit of chemistry right away. And again, there are parts in this movie that almost feel like the ideas want to break out, or at least some genuineness wants to break out, but then it goes right back to start, standard stock and everything. And also, I cannot emphasize enough just how terrible the sound design is in this. Just how the jump scare noises are over amplified. I thought it was a speaker system. Apparently, other people have been saying that's an issue. And Corin Hardy is not a good director and needs to be told that, because if this is the best he can do after doing The Nun, which was not very good, probably time to, figure out being a second unit director, because you're not cut out to be the main guy. But they are going to go to Harvest Fest. Roll basically confesses his feelings to Grace. Grace says, look, you're a nice guy and everything. You're going to make a girl very happy. It's not going to be me. I don't feel that way. But she lets him down easy, and she's not being a dick. And he takes it probably a little bit harder than he needs to. They're all dressed up in costumes. There's this maze, though. And, I mean, again, kind of like Hellfest. But Hellfest also had way too few employees for being the carnival type. But the maze literally looked like it was about a quarter mile. Where is this? We didn't even have a quarter mile of a maze in like these farms in Snohomish when I went there. That was like 07. God damn. That was a while ago. Terrible, terrible thing, by the way. Muddy everywhere. It took forever to get that steam cleaned out of my car. Moving on. We get Grace being pursued, and she ends up getting, basically sucked dry. She completely gets sucked off. Usually it's the blonde sucking people up, but I digress. Humorously, she gets, that she rings the doorbell, or rings the bell, for the thing that's up there, because Dario Cuento was there. It ring the bell, and nobody's going to get that. And yeah, it seems like I'm kind of all over the place with this review. Guess what? I'm trying to find some humor, because I found nothing in this movie that was worth it. So Grace ends up getting killed. Drew doesn't believe that it's him or that it's her because, she looks so old. Then his parents mention a thing about him drunk driving. A little bit later, he is finding out about, he sees the beast, whatever the hell it is, whatever the hell this entity is, it's coming after him. And they mention about the drunk driving killing you. And then, so this is probably about the only time where the film might have come alive, but it's like, it treats him like he was in an accident and like getting to beat, the ribs are popping, all this and shredded and this kind of stuff. And then he just collect this, and it sounds cooler than it actually plays out. And he ends up dying right in front of his parents when they finally burst in the door. And then basically Chrys and Ellie have to figure out what's going on. They end up talking to the grandmother of that boy again. She mentions what you would have to do is there's no way to cheat death, no way to do that. But if you put your blood on somebody and you mark them, then death goes to them instead. Okay. I have neglected to mention that there is this character, Noah, that showed up pretty much in the beginning that's supposed to be this church-going guy that's a troubled Ute pastor that ends up also being a drug dealer on the side and is pretty much a charlatan. And he beats up Roll at one point, and then right before the carnival chase thing where Grace ends up getting killed, he ends up trying to basically hit on Chrys and then also kind of makes a comment about Ellie being gay. And Chrys beats him up, and then at one point has this knife thing that he had and kind of, does that to his nose. Just boop, that. There are people that would pay good money for that. People that are sick. We basically then revisit that character a little bit later. And Roll, by the way, is one of the last people to go. But after Drew, or whatever his name is, got killed in that car wreck, simulation, they find out about that stuff. They're like, okay, we can't mark anybody. Roll has this idea to take on the Revenger persona where everyone has to die at least once, or everyone dies at least once. And he is going to end up essentially kidnapping Noah and trying to mark him with his blood and stuff like that and everything to take care of him. And he's got this like cross tattoo on there. And he takes him to the sawmill. And the idea is he has to do this before death gets him, basically. And also, Chrys and Ellie are going to get there, but they have their own ideas that they come up with shortly after this. And Roll decides he can't do it. And Noah's tied down, by the way, and has been fed some weird Molly-type drugs, so he's probably hallucinating. And, Roll can't do it. And then Roll ends up getting shredded by this invisible saw thing. That's kind of hilarious. I mean, he ends up getting, just spun out and whatever. This is one of two movies that involved turning people into pulp, by the way. This and Strangers Chapter 3. Which isn't necessarily a spoiler because it plays in on somebody that died in Chapter 2. But we end up basically seeing, it's down to 3 people. And the bright idea between Ellie and Chrys, because Chrys saw her death, is that she ODs again. She can't do that to somebody, so Ellie comes up with the idea, I'm going to do something to help you. We're going to get all these supplies together, like gets all these medical supplies she just happens to have in the back of her trunk. Noah, by the way, is still passed out and tied to the goddamn thing, the chair, and seemingly whatever the fuck he's on. And he is out of the picture right now. Ellie's idea is to basically knock out Chrys, bring her back after her heart stops, and then death will skip her, like we're Final Destination 2. And then Chrys says, well, don't do too much to me because I got to bring you back. And she needles Ellie, makes sure to needle her and says, I'm sorry, you got to live. They have this instant 0 to 60, like, love. We have known each other all our lives and finally love each other, and I got to make sure I save you. It's like they're in their 50s. So Chrys ends up falling into this ice bathtub. They just happen to have all this other stuff. They have this, shock paddle thing that they just happen to have at the sawmill, which I guess makes sense just in case with all the equipment, but still. They're going to do this. Chrys is sinking down in the goddamn bathtub, and Noah essentially ends up waking up and thanking God for saving him, but then decides, you know what, I'm going to go on a rampage. I got this gun that Roll had, and he's going to go get the girls that have, locked themselves away in this garage area of this sawmill. I guess it was an auto shop too. And while Chrys is fighting off the dark part of herself and everything and trying to get back, and Ellie's trying to shock her back, Noah's doing like a, here's Johnny. He's like using a sledgehammer. Why don't you call my name? Breaking it, and he eventually ends up shooting indiscriminately, and ends up clipping Ellie. And Ellie also is seeing her death. Whatever, she's in like some kind of medical gear, stuff like that, not doing well, and she's almost got Chrys back. And then Chrys suddenly has this montage of shit going on. All these memories and everything, and just recent shit of like kissing Ellie that would happen like 20 minutes before. And I'm like, we didn't like these scenes the first time. And then she wakes up and Ellie's clipped and bleeding. And then, remember the thing I said about the blood? You got to mark people with your blood. So Ellie's bleeding to the point where like a trail of blood is going like about 10 feet. So she probably should be dead. But Noah sees that and takes the blood and puts it on his hands and does some stuff and does this. And then suddenly the death whistle is marked to him. And then the killer just gets him and kills him and skips Ellie and Chrys. I mean, not that I want Noah to live necessarily. I mean, the character was just grossly one note and shit, but god damn it. And okay, that's the end of the movie. Except then we go 3 months later. They still got the same locker. And this one girl that's struggling with stuff opens a locker and finds the death whistle. And seemingly does well. But hasn't blown it yet. And does a talent show thing. Like graduation thing, whatever the fuck it is. And all the people I think it's a mid-credits scene if I remember right. Because Daphne Keane and Sophie are together. Daphne's got like a short haircut. Actually, she pulls off the short haircut really well, so I think she should kind of keep that. I think that kind of works for her. But anyway, that just ends up being the end of it. Okay. Then this girl is brought up on stage and is going to go blow the whistle, and Ellie and Chrys are trying to get her not to do it, and she does it, and everybody's suddenly affected by the goddamn whistle. They think they can get a sequel out of this. Fuck you, Shudder. Fuck you, IFC, for thinking it. And I love Shudder. Anybody from Shudder watches this. I love Shudder. But no. Whistle gets an F. Whistle is one of the worst horror movies of the year. And it's only early February. So agree, disagree what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Rentlin, and until we see something different with an Aztec whistle, not on the dark web, by the way, I saw that once. Always delete your search history. Happy trails to you.